Welcome, everyone. We'll give everyone just a few seconds here to hop on and join the event, and then we'll get started in just a moment. All right, good evening, and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Josie here from Greenlight, and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with Laura Silverman launching her new book, Those Summer Nights. She'll be talking with Marisa Kanter, so you are in for an excellent time. Before we start and I turn things over to them, I just want to say a huge thanks to Laura and Marisa for being here with us tonight and making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Just a few housekeeping things before we begin. First, in our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the authors, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other during tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts here. It's a great way to show your appreciation for Laura and Marisa and to interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by our authors tonight, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to pull questions only from the Q&A module to be answered in the later part of tonight's program. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Those Summer Nights, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. at both of our stores, where you can purchase both Laura and Marisa's books and many others on site. You can also order online at greenlightbookstore.com for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll drop a buy link in the chat. As a thank you for attending tonight's virtual event, we're offering 10% off the featured book. You'll just enter the coupon code GreenlightEvents10 into the coupon discount section at checkout. I'll share that with you in the chat as well. And Laura will be stopping by the store tomorrow evening to sign copies of the book. So if you'd like a personalized or signed copy, just make sure you put that in the comment section at checkout. Okay, but on to the good stuff. Our first author for this evening is Marisa Kanter. Marisa is a young adult author, amateur baker, and reality television enthusiast. She is the author of What I Like About You and As If on Cue. She currently lives in Los Angeles, writing love stories by day and searching for the perfect slice of pizza by night. She'll be talking with our featured author tonight, Laura Silverman. Laura is an author and freelance editor and currently lives in Brookyln, New York. She earned her MFA in writing for children at the New School. Her books include Girl Out of Water, You Asked for Perfect, It's a Whole Spiel, Recommended for You, Up All Night, Game On, and of course, Those Summer Nights. Laura's new book, Those Summer Nights, publishes today. After recovering from a life-changing injury, a teen girl must navigate a new summer job, an ex-best friend, and two surprisingly attractive coworkers in this romp of a rom-com for fans of Jenny Han and Siobhan Vivian. So you are in for an excellent evening. Laura and Marisa are going to join in conversation, and then they'll be chatting with all of you. So please take it away, Laura and Marisa.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Laura. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I absolutely loved this book, as I have gushed to you so many times. So I'm just so thrilled to be here.
Thank you, Marisa, and thank you, Greenlight, for hosting us. Hello to everyone who is joining us. Please, if you have any questions for us about our books, writing, publishing, anything, drop them in the chat. We are happy for this to be as much of a conversation as possible. So ask us anything you would like. And let's talk about our books, because I feel like Marisa and I have so much in common, both in our lives and in our books. The parallels like between Those Summer Nights and As If on Cue and our other books. I feel like we should talk about passions first, because we both like talk about passions a lot in these two novels, and what it means for a high school student to have so much focus on just one passion and put so much pressure on it.
Yeah, I think that is something that like I certainly struggled with growing up. I was always just like looking back, the amount of pressure I put on myself was unfair, quite frankly. But I think that's just like the environment of high school I know like you asked for perfect deals with this with like the college application process. I feel like pretty much all of our books touch on this one way or another, just teens just expecting too much out of themselves. For Hanna, it's obviously her soccer aspirations. Did you play soccer? Did that come from a real place?
I played soccer, but not as a teen. I played soccer as a young child on like the Jewish league. I went to like a very competitive high school, like in academics and in sports, and I certainly was not good enough at sports to pursue them seriously, which is just like so problematic in and of itself. I feel like I've talked about this a lot, but it's like I enjoyed playing sports recreationally, but I feel like I was told as a teenager you can only pursue these things if you're really good at them, and otherwise you might as well not bother.
What's the point?
Like there's no point if you can't be like amazing at it. And so I just like stopped playing sports even when I got to middle school because I wasn't good enough to compete on a high level, and instead I went down the path of the things I was good at, like academics, which, like you said, is what I talk about. And my second novel, You Asked for Perfect, is all about a student under this like intense academic pressure and intense pressure to be perfect. And in the recent book, Those Summer Nights, my main character, Hanna, does play soccer, and it's her entire life. And she wants to go to the Olympics one day, and she pins like all of her hopes and dreams on this one thing. And she is an incredible player, but she doesn't allow herself to like have anything else in her life. And so when she gets injured and it ends her soccer career, she is at a complete loss. And this book is about learning to heal from that and learning to find herself again after putting so much pressure on the one thing she now can't have.
Yeah, and I just loved the way that you wrote about this topic and just Hanna's arc in general. I think, like, as you mentioned, I touch on this in my work as well. And within my book, As If on Cue, it's music, and it's like Reed playing the clarinet and thinking he has to be like putting so much pressure on himself to be the best to go to conservatory. And then the main character having sort of the opposite take where she just does theater for fun and like is basically like, it shouldn't be that serious. It doesn't have to be serious, and just how those two different like personalities conflict and then come together. I love I wish I was more like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love the conversations you have about that in the book. And I also want to point out that in As If on Cue, one of my favorite things is that her parents are following their creative pursuits as jobs, which is something we can relate to. And that's like what really, makes Natalie question whether or not she wants to pursue her hobby as a job, because she sees it making them kind of miserable and stressed out a lot of the time. And I thought it was like really great to see that like questioned on the page from a teenager perspective, because I feel like so many teenagers are fed this line of, you have to pursue your passion, you have to be the best at it, and that's the only way you're going to be happy. And I think we should question that.
For sure, because it definitely did not hit me until I was in the middle of it all, of the whole like, oh, like this is my career now. What does that mean? Do I still love it? Like, what does, like, just the way that your relationship with your art changes when it becomes a professional pursuit is just something we're not thinking about most people aren't thinking about at 17.
I feel like it's so important to like diversify your interests, which is kind of something we address in our books, and also something I'm trying to do for myself as a creative, because when your passion becomes your job, it's no longer so much of a creative outlet. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I'm curious if you do anything else creatively or like as a hobby that you feel like has become an outlet for you now that writing is your job.
Yeah, so this does not mean to be a plug at all, but it just like you asked. So
do it.
But basically at the beginning of the pandemic, my husband and I started a podcast, as all, millennials do.
I'm laughing because my boyfriend literally started a Simpsons podcast during the pandemic. So this is
Yeah, ours was about Lizzie McGuire because it was my favorite show and he'd never seen it. So we watched it all together. But honestly, we've continued to podcast together just to talk about like media and pop culture, and just to have something that is like adjacent to the thing I love and just so low stakes is really nice. Like I'm not thinking about how many people are listening. I'm not like concerned about the metrics of it at all. I'm just like chatting with my husband and some friends who we have on as guests, and it's just like really joyful.
If you ever need a podcast guest, I can talk about Survivor.
I would love, honestly, people are like, you should do a Survivor podcast, but there are already so many good ones. It's like a crowded space.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's like a very good outlet. I feel like I've found an outlet that's a bit of a tricky line. I've like recently gotten onto TikTok, which is a tricky line because it's still connected to my career because I'm mostly promoting my book, but it's been like such a creative outlet to like act and play and come up with ideas for trends. And it like is kind of lighting that creative spark that I haven't gotten to feel as often as an adult. And I'm also going back to improv classes this fall, which I feel like kind of ties into the same thing. Like I'm not trying to pursue improv or like fun acting to like make it become anything serious. I'm doing it just because it's like fun and enjoyable to, put myself out there and like play with new characters and like try something new.
I love that. Yeah, I was also thinking about like getting crafty again because it's something that I just like knitting or just different types of crafty things. It was a thing where I did it when I was little, but then just thought I wasn't good enough to try harder projects. So I just kind of stopped, and now I'm like, why did I do that?
Great. That's a great question. Wow, people really want us to do the Survivor podcast.
You know what? Noted. That's so funny. But back to those summer nights. I love a workplace rom-com, and so do you, because you can't seem to stop writing about them, which I love. This is your second.
Yes, second.
So I just kind of wanted to ask, like, what continues to draw you to that setting?
So my first workplace rom-com was recommended for you. And it came about in a couple of different ways. One, I mean, I was such a fan of all of the workplace comedies on TV, like The Office and Parks and Recreation. They were just like easy. They made me feel happy inside. It just always felt like a safe, happy place. And I remember my agent, I think he like tweeted one day, like, why don't we ever see, or not ever see, but he was like, I'm surprised there aren't more books about teenagers working part-time jobs, because that's such like a big part of a teenager's life. And it really struck me because I worked throughout the far majority of high school, and so did most of my friends. And I hadn't really represented this in any of my books yet. So I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to write a workplace comedy, a workplace rom-com, because, you know, that was kind of my life growing up. And those environments are so fun and so diverse. And it allows you to bring in this like giant cast of characters. You know, we have people outside of just her high school class. We have people from other schools. We have people older than her, full-grown adults. We have all of the very interesting customers. I think some of my favorite things to write in these books are customer interaction. So yeah, recommended for you. Takes place in a bookstore during the holiday season. I kind of call it my Two Jews at Christmas book. And get to make fun of that in a lot of different ways. And if you don't already know, Those Summer Nights takes place in summer, of course, at one of these megaplex entertainment centers where there's bowling and arcade, mini golf, and it just seemed like the most iconic place for a summer of shenanigans. My dad is in the chat that I need to give him credit on the location. So when I was brainstorming the book recommended for you, I knew I wanted my character to work a part-time job, and I knew I wanted to have a lot going on, and I couldn't figure out where to set it. And my dad suggested that it be at a mall. So she does end up working at a bookstore in a mall. Thank you, Dad. And Natalie, in your book, also has a part-time job. It's like a little, it's not the main location of the book, but we do get to see that. If you do want to talk about that decision, and did you have any part-time jobs?
Yeah, I think that like you, it was such a part of my teen life. Yeah, and as a fun cue, Natalie is like a hostess at a restaurant that her friend's parents own. And what I like about you, the main character in that book, also works part-time at a bakery. I did, work pretty much as soon as I turned 16. I got that like part-time summer job that turned into it was just a retail life. Like it was a TJ Maxx. I was teen Maxxinista. But you're so right. It's just like that setting is so like just ripe for just bizarre interactions. Yeah. Like people, like when you work in retail, people are just wild to you.
100%.
And I love those interactions in your books because it's so real.
Yeah, I feel like it's when you're working a part-time job. So my main job, I worked the front counter at this really popular pizza place. And I feel like it's one of those early times in a teenager's life where you start interacting with adults. I don't want to say as a peer because you're still a child, but you start interacting with them as a coworker, as opposed to like, these adults are your teacher or your friend's parents or something like that. And so it's kind of like the step into the adult world where we see a lot of changes happening. And so I think like that's really interesting to explore.
Yeah, and just like that hierarchy that always happens, right? When you're at the same level as an adult, but you're like, oh, you're 16.
Yeah.
My subordinate. No, I'm
not. Speaking of being a teenage girl, I know we've been wanting to talk about this topic. We talk about this topic privately all the time. Should we talk about what it's like to have reviewers call our characters unlikable, and how it's really interesting that I've written 4 young adult novels and 3 of them feature teenage girls and they've all been called unlikable. And my book that features a teenage boy, he's never been called unlikable. Let's discuss.
What do you mean read reviews? We don't read reviews.
Oh yeah, no, of course not.
No, I mean, this is something I'm really passionate about because what really gets me is people claiming that they want unlikable female protagonists, but like you don't, like you fundamentally don't, right? Like you want this like quirky, like girl with no flaws. Like I feel like that's what they want, right? Like they don't want the mess. They don't want girls to make mistakes, to be selfish, to fail. And I think that is just it represents like the way that like on a bigger picture, teenage girls are treated by society too. Like it's not like our reviews are very much a microcosm for a bigger picture, I think.
Yeah, we have our teenage girls get called immature and unlikable because they make wrong decisions, they make missteps, but that's literally just being human. I mean, you cannot go back to your early life or your life now and tell me that you've never made a mistake. So they make mistakes, and they also have big feelings, and maybe some people like to call them dramatic because they have big feelings and emotions. But yeah, I just find it really, like I said, interesting that this will happen to my girl characters, but not my boy character. And you ask for perfect, who also makes plenty of mistakes and plenty of unlikable and selfish decisions. I think we need to give teenage girls like all of the same room to mess up that we give to boys. It's really important.
Yeah, and it's just, it's such a thing that happens over and over again. I think I actually get pretty meta and address this in As If on Cue, where at one point Natalie is like, why is it with him? It's like, he's passionate about music, but for me, I want this play to happen. I'm dramatic. Like, what is with that language choice for him versus me?
That scene was so good. I feel like I went to like screenshot it, like take a picture and send it to you. I must have forgotten to, because I was like, yes.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's something that I didn't realize would be such a thing until, you know, I started putting books out there and seeing the reactions. And it's just, like I said, a really interesting sort of peek into a larger society.
That said, of course, I think, you know, most of the people who read our books, this is not the majority of readers who read these types of reviews. This is definitely a small portion of the population. You know, most people, you know, do recognize these are fully fleshed out characters, but it is always interesting to note.
And they're always the ones who like tag us in their reviews as well.
I know.
Which we love.
My favorite is when I'll get a review that's like, she was so unlikable in the beginning, but by the end, she starts acting better. And I'm like, it's called growth.
It's a character arc. Like, that's what we're supposed to be doing here.
Okay, enough about the reviews that we're not supposed to be reading. Let's move on to a happier topic. Romance. We can talk about romance.
Yes.
I was absolutely obsessed by the romance and As If on Cue. I love a love-hate romance, which is what we have in the book. And we also get like, kind of like, even though they're not best friends at the time, we get like childhood best friends to lovers vibes as well, because these characters share so much history together. So you're really combining two of my favorites into one book. And how did you do this?
Oh, thank you. I call it childhood frenemies to lovers.
Thanks.
I mean, when I was writing that book, I was just being as self-indulgent as possible. I was just throwing all of my favorite tropes and things into it, but I really wanted to make sure that they really felt like enemies at the beginning, almost to my detriment, because some people are like, wow, like she really hates him. And I'm like, yes, thank you. That is what I am going for. And I just love the, like, you know, for her, it's like she builds up this whole narrative in her head about him and the way that he is. And it just is totally, you come to learn as you read, fully all in her head to like this narrative that she constructed about this boy. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I just love enemies to lovers. I love a slow burn. I love when people realize like the things that connect them to each other, like when they both go see a musical together and are just like geeking out about it. And she's like, why am I having fun? Oh no, why is he suddenly attractive? Like, what is happening?
I also feel like there was like a little bit of like secret pining from his side. Like, I feel like he was definitely into her far before she realized she was into him, which is also always fun.
Oh
Just
yeah.
be like, girl, get it together. Why don't you see what the rest of us see?
Yes, I also really just love writing a beta boy. Like all of my boys tend to be like really soft and gentle and just like, yeah, not alpha at all. But yeah, his whole thing. So in As If on Cue, they have this long history of like pranking each other, and it like evolves into this whole basically their budget for their arts programs has been cut. So but the band that Rita's in is really good, so they get whatever little money there is, and Natalie is trying to make sure that her drama club gets what it needs to, you know, make a play happen. And so she just like devolves into this totally like ridiculous immature prank war situation with him, and she's so serious about it, and he's just like if this is how she'll talk to me, like cool, like I'll do the pranks. It's just so, like I said, it's very one-sided, the hate on her end. But oh my gosh, in Those Summer Nights, you also do romance so well. I mean, the friends to lovers, the brother's best friend. And I really loved that it was like a younger brother. I mean, there's like a very small, it's like what, they're a year apart, but that she's older, because I feel like you generally see like the younger sister pining for like the older brother's best friend. And Ethan's also just like a very sweet and soft and just gentle boy. And just, they were just so sweet together.
I definitely do make choices like that on purpose in my books. The standard is certainly the older brother's best friend, which is a trope I love too, but I do try to switch up those standards sometimes of like, the guy doesn't always have to be older. Sometimes like the girl can be older, and I want to show that as romantic, just like, when I'm introducing a doctor as a character, do I always want this doctor to be male, or do we want a female doctor here? Or, I just try to be a little more focused about those choices and not just always like defaulting. And if I do default, to a standard, I want it to be for a certain reason. So yeah, Those Summer Nights has a younger brother's best friend romance, which is one of my favorite tropes. And I just feel like there's something so like homey about that trope of this person, has always been in your life in a certain way, but like one day you wake up and look at them in a different light. There's someone who understands you probably better than you ever thought they would understand you. I also honestly just like wanted the opportunity for them to have like a sneaky makeout scene at home, because I feel like that's just iconic, and I might have like chosen the trope just so I could write one of those scenes. But there's like, I don't know, my favorite interactions between them are like the late at night interactions when the rest of the house is asleep. I think it's like the tiniest bit of tiptoe into like the forbidden romance trope without it being like a gross forbidden romance. You know what I mean? Like they need to keep it like low key at first. But yeah, Ethan's character was just like really special to me. I feel like he saw Hanna in a way that the rest of the characters didn't, and really helped her work through all of her grief that she was going through, and let her like grieve on her own time, and wasn't like pushing and forcing things. Something I also loved about this book is that she kind of has two love interests. I wouldn't call it a love triangle, but in the beginning of the book, she has another really hot coworker, and she starts hooking up with this other coworker at the beginning of the book. And I kind of wanted to, again, play with that idea of not making my character perfect, like I think she's allowed to be a little messy and like hook up with like more than one guy over summer, and that doesn't make her a bad person or an impure person or something like that. Like she's like allowed to have fun. And I had fun writing that.
Yeah, it was so fun, and something that's honestly like very, I guess, pretty rare to see, right? Like I feel like we usually get the like, this is the guy and this is the girl and this is the pairing, like pretty early, or the girl, you know, whatever, in an MF situation. But
Or
yeah, I
there's like,
love, sorry, go
or
ahead.
there's like a straight up romance triangle, like in like the Summer
Right.
Pretty series, or you know, so many others. There's like an actual triangle, but this was more just like,
There
yeah,
were no
gonna have a
emotional
fling with
stakes
the
for
guy.
Patrick. We'll just put it that way. Like Patrick was also just having a good time, and there wasn't anything like,
Yeah.
no feelings were getting hurt in this. That's fine. Oh, did you freeze? Oh no.
Oh, am I breaking up a little?
Okay,
Can you hear
you
me?
broke up a little bit. You're back.
Okay.
Don't leave me.
We're going to switch over to question and answer soon. So if any, I think we have one in the chat. So if anyone else has questions for us, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll switch over to that in a minute. Do we want to address a couple other topics first, Marisa?
Yes, for sure. I want to talk about, not to bring the mood down, but I definitely want to talk about boobies and grief and just like how beautifully that was woven into your book. I write a similar grief arc in What I Like About You, and it's just something that I always really appreciate seeing, and especially you know, with Jewish characters and just like Jewish grief and like just showing like the customs and the ways that like we grieve. And I just would love to hear why you included this in those summer nights, and yeah, just what made you want to write it and talk about it.
Yeah. My grandmother, who has now passed away, was very special to me. And I feel like I was very much writing about her when I wrote those summer nights. I talk about Hannah's bubby being her soulmate. And I like really do think my grandma was my soulmate. We were just so similar in so many ways. And it's like just so strange to like think about this person who understood me so much is not around anymore. And she passed away all the way back in 2017, and I'm still very much grieving her. And when good things happen or bad things happen, I still wish I could pick up the phone and talk to her about it. And I feel like it wasn't even a conscious decision to write this into the book. The book was very much about Hanna having this soccer injury and having to start over. And at some point, I guess I decided I wanted to go deeper with those emotional stakes, and this bubby grandmother plot came to be. And it was like really therapeutic for me to write it. I feel like I was able to like honor my grandma's presence in my life while writing this book. And it's definitely, those parts are the most special parts to me in the story.
I love that so much. I had such a similar experience with What I Like About You, which is dedicated to both of my grandmothers. So yeah, I just felt all of that just so deeply, and it was so well done. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. And yeah, of course, you know, these grandmas, these bubbies are, you know, Jewish, and we write about many Jewish things in our book. So as our last topic before the Q&A, of course, I would love to talk a little bit about that. What makes you write Jewish characters? What do you love most about writing Jewish characters?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we talk about this a lot, like amongst ourselves and in our Jewish writing circles, about how I think for both of us, it wasn't even always that way, right? Like that we sort of came to writing Jewish characters after a period or a few manuscripts of not, because it wasn't something that we necessarily saw growing up in the most, like, I mean, we saw ourselves in, you know, Holocaust stories, or just like as like the best friend sidekick character. We didn't really get to see ourselves as the leads in a rom-com. So I don't know, for me, after the like 2016 election and just like seeing just such an overt rise in anti-Semitism for the first time, like in my lifetime. It was just became really clear and like important to me to start writing Jewish rep and to put Jewish characters, Jewish teens into stories where they just get to, you know, have fun and fall in love and make mistakes and kind of just exist like we're here too.
100%. Same experience growing up. I did not read any Jewish stories unless those stories were about the Holocaust. And this was like up until my first book was coming out. So my first book, Girl Out of Water, which I do love so much, the main character is not Jewish. And that's because it literally did not occur to me to write a Jewish character. I never read a Jewish character in like a summary fiction book. And so it did not cross my mind. And around the time my book was coming out, it's when the like diverse books movement was like really starting to go strong. And I started reading all these like incredible books by people of color and of different sexual identities. And it made me think about my own life and my own culture. And I was like, why am I not writing Jewish stories? Why am I not putting my stories on the page? And so that's what I began to do. And I remember some of the early Jewish books that I read were The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli and Rachel Solomon's, what is the title of her first one? Is escaping me for a second.
You'll miss me when I'm gone.
Miss me when I'm gone. Those were the first times I like saw my experience on the page, and it meant so much to me. And so I wanted to do the same for myself and for readers out there.
Yeah, Upside was like the game changer for me. I had started drafting What I Like About You when that book came out, and just reading it, I just remember finishing it and just like hugging it close to my chest and just like honestly crying over it, because it was just like, it was the first time I felt like I really saw myself in a book in that way. And it sort of like validated that like our stories can be told, that we do deserve rom-coms. And it was kind of like the push I needed to, you know, even like finish What I Like About You. So yeah, Becky's out there doing the work.
She is. She is. And the beautiful thing is there are so many ways to tell that story. You know, we can tell the straight up fluffy Jewish rom-com, or as if on cue, you know, a lot of it is a fluffy rom-com, but you tackle anti-Semitism in this book as well. And I was really impressed by how you did it. And it like resonated with experiences I had. And I just wanted to like shove this book into people's hands so that they can read it and understand.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's funny because when it comes to like whether or not to include anti-Semitism, it's always like a very intentional choice on my end, and whether or not it fits into the story. So in my first book, I just wanted that to be like a happy, safe space for Jewish readers. Like it was very much the Jewish experience that I wish I had growing up, where like the main character has a lot of Jewish friends. There's a really like vibrant Jewish community. And then with As If on Cue, that was a lot closer to my actual Jewish experience, you know, being one of the only Jewish kids in my school, dealing with a lot of like microaggressions and anti-Semitism. And yeah, it felt like it wouldn't have been honest to like Natalie's experience in that setting to not address it. And I just think more people need to understand what is anti-Semitism and like what these microaggressions are. Because I would honestly like pretty much like gaslight myself growing up and saying, oh, like it's not a big deal. Oh, it's like just as like a form of survival, but like, no, it's wrong.
It is a big deal.
And I wish I was Natalie growing up. Like I wish I was like, that scene is very much how I wish that I was able to react in those moments. But at the same time, I didn't have a person to back me up in those moments either. So it was just kind of like cathartic to write.
the scene where Reed backs her up and, backs himself up.
Yeah, they kick like an anti-Semitic kid out of the musical, just like straight up like get out, goodbye.
It was like one of the most incredible scenes I've read. I was just like clapping and I was like, oh my God, talk about romance. It's like when what's his face rips the Nazi flag in Sound of Music. I'm like, yes, thank you. Okay, let's pop over to our questions in the chat.
Yes.
We can get to those before we wrap up. Katie asked, how was this novel different from your other works? What was exciting to you about those differences? What was challenging? Excuse me. So the first thing that popped to mind is Those Summer Nights is the first book that I used flashbacks for. I had not done this before and kind of went back and forth with my editor on whether or not to include them. And ultimately we decided to include them, but keep them very short. And I felt like it was important to include the flashbacks because the main bulk of the story takes place during the current summer, where Hanna gets a job at this multiplex entertainment center and is just trying to like heal and find herself again. But so much happened to her in the previous summer when she got her ankle injury, when she lost her bubby, when she had a falling out with her best friend, when she started like, misusing alcohol. I felt like I owed it to the character to show those scenes unfold and to help them understand how Hanna was led to this place. So that was like definitely a new challenge for me because I know personally as a reader, it can be difficult when one part of the novel is stronger than the other. If the flashbacks aren't strong enough or interesting enough, you kind of feel like, why are they here? I'd rather just get back to the present timeline. And I feel like my editor did really help me out with that by like encouraging me to shorten them and like just keep them as tight as possible and just get these like snippets of the past throughout the book.
I'm glad that flashbacks came up because I definitely wanted to ask about them and like what that process was and if they were always there. So it's really interesting to hear that it sort of evolved throughout the writing process for you.
Because you have them in it as if on cue as well.
I do. And they were always like the intention of them was always there. Even from my first draft, they changed and were refined and things were added and things were cut over the process. But I thought it was really important to show Natalie and Reed, they are in such a like contentious place in the present. I really wanted to show like the evolution of where that came from, starting from when they were little kids and just like the really complicated history with Natalie's dad, who is Reed's music teacher, and sort of the resentment that builds over time because of that relationship.
Which is such a strong part of that book. I feel like the nuance of that father-daughter relationship was really incredible. And speaking of which, we have a second question from my dad in the chat. Hi, Dad. He asks, at which point during the process do you decide what the title of your book is going to be? I feel like this is different every time. Like when a writer is drafting, we have a working title and that title might be something we love, something we hate, and it's just a placeholder. But ultimately, once the book is in the hands of a publisher, they will decide what your title is going to be working with you. So let's see, for my books, I think of my novels, Those Summer Nights is the only one that kept the same title all the way through. This was like the original title I had in mind when I was drafting the book, and that's the title that stayed. For my other novels, they came up when I was working and collaborating with the publisher. Though my friend Anna title recommended for you, my publisher and I could not think of something, and then she came up with this genius title. Anna Meriano, check out her books.
Such a good title. Such a good title. For me, I have yet to successfully title my own book. It's like a running joke that like I just, again, I have like the working title while I'm drafting, but so far, both What I Like About You and As If on Cue were pitched to me by my editor. And then my third yet to be announced book is still yet to be announced because we want to figure out the title before we do.
Yeah.
So titles are hard.
They're really very difficult. Oh, that's funny. Someone said Those Summer Nights is giving Grease. Yes, I definitely think of the song every time I say the title. It doesn't have much in common with Grease, but I feel like the vibe is still there.
Yeah. I think it works.
Alex has a funny question for you, Marisa. Alex is asking, Marisa, indulge me with a Survivor question. What Survivor contestants are most similar to the main characters?
Oh my gosh.
That's
This
a
is
hard question.
such a good question. So hard on the spot. Fun fact is like, I also try to weave Survivor into all of my books in any way that I can. So like Reed is a Survivor fan. So it comes up and Natalie kind of trolls him about that sort of fandom throughout the book. But oh my gosh, what characters? I feel like Reed, my first instinct was like Adam Klein vibes. Not gonna lie.
Of course.
Like, I feel like that's how he would play the game, just so earnestly in the way that Adam does. Oh my gosh. Now I'm like forgetting every player who's ever played Survivor, even though I've seen every season, some more than once.
It's a tricky on the spot. I've had some hard on the spot questions. Like I've had like, what candy bar would your characters be? And I'm just like, I don't know.
I've never eaten a Hershey bar before in my life. What are you like just forgetting names of everything? It's like the classic, what are you reading? Or what have you been reading? And you just forget every book you've ever read.
It's like I've actually never read a book once in my entire life. Speaking of which, maybe that should be our sign off if we can remember it. What books are we reading or have we read recently that we would recommend?
Yes, we can have a little recommended for you moment. Close this out. Yeah, feel free to keep adding questions. I can jump back to, because I think you came up with this question and I'm really interested in the answer of which character in your book are you the most like, or which character would you want to hang out with in real life? I think that's a fun one.
I would say it's not that my main character, Hanna, is a complete self-insert, but I do share similarities with her. And, like I mentioned, I do feel like I was working through some of my own stuff while writing this novel, working through grief with her, working through, losing access to a passion. So I'm probably most similar to the main character, Hanna. And which character would I like to hang out with most? Obviously, Bubby, and or their dog, Figgy, and or her brother, Joey. Would be very fun to hang out with.
Joey's so great. He actually reminded me, again, another similarity in our work. He reminded me a lot of Ollie, like Hallie's little brother, and What I Like About You, just like the younger brothers who were just so like wise beyond their years.
Yeah, I really do love that trope of like the silly character all of a sudden realizing they have this like incredible depth to them and they're not just comic relief. Like that gets me every time in the story.
It's so good. For me, I would say that, I keep trying to do this thing where I'm like, the next book I write, it will not be self-insert. I am so not this character. And then I was doing this with my last book. And then by the end of the book, I turned it in and I was like, oh no, again. And I honestly feel like anybody who says that like their characters, like at least don't have pieces of them in it, I find that hard to believe because we're all writing from our own experiences in place. But Hallie, the main character of my debut, What I Like About You, is definitely like who I was in high school, like with her online community, wanting to work in publishing, social anxiety. Like I really just like, that was very self-inserty. Natalie is much more of a like who I wish I was in high school, just in terms of her just like outspokenness and her ability to be so like laser focused in a way that she just is able to like speak her mind and not like take crap from anyone. Like I wish that that could have been me. But I was a Hallie. I was a little anxious being. And then who I would want to hang out with, again, probably like Gramps and What I Like About You, a cool grandparent character.
Yeah.
For
We
sure.
just want to hang out with the old people.
Yes.
I cannot wait till I'm like retirement home age. Like I am so looking forward to that. I just like want to sit around with my friends and play games all day and gossip. Like, please let me move in.
Yeah, it does sound like a good time.
100%. Okay, let's wrap up with book recommendations. I have to recommend, I've been raving about this book to literally everyone. If you have somehow not heard of it already, it is called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It is adult fiction, but we do also see the characters as children and as like teens in college. It is the most beautiful book I've read in years. It is about the relationship between two characters who are video game designers. And so they're connected through this passion and love for games, and we get to experience the many ups and downs of their relationship over the years. And it's like compulsively readable, so touching, so funny, so heartbreaking. I really wish I could read it all over again for the first time. Strongly recommend. Also strongly recommend As If on Cue, which I also just finished reading and was such a delight and also really so emotional. And these two have my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. I know, not to be like those summer nights. But yes, so good. I actually, while you were talking, I have like a list on my phone of books that I have recently read, because I also genuinely do the thing where I just forget everything I've recently read. Let's see, I've really had a pretty good reading streak since I have been off of deadline. Like everybody, I think, in the cultural zeitgeist right now, I really enjoyed I'm Glad My Mom Died, Jeanette McCurdy's memoir. I don't know if you've read it yet.
I haven't read it.
But I, grew up, I was just like the perfect demographic for it, because like I watched iCarly when I was the perfect age for it. Like I knew her as Sam, and it's just such like a unique memoir, and she just does not hold back on her experiences and the things that happened to her. And I really recommend the audio if you are to read it, because she narrates it and it's wonderful. And then I also recently read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. I think it came out last year. I'm a little late to the game on this one, but it was just such a beautiful romance between a woman who, it's like they're both writers, and I will never get tired of publishing romance, but she writes like paranormal, like romance, and has like a really popular like black vampire series. And then he's like a serious like literary fiction, like Colson Whitehead type writer. And they have a lot of like history. It's like a second chance. It's so beautifully done.
That sounds excellent. I definitely need to add that to my list.
It's so good.
Okay, and should we talk about where people can find us online? You can find me on my website, laurasilvermanwrites.com, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter at LJSilverman1 and TikTok at Laura_Silverman.
Cool. Cool. Yes, I am. My website's just marisakanter.com, and I am on across socials just at Marisa Kanter. I'm lucky nobody has my name out this way, so I get to claim all the handles.
Nice.
All right, I've got the websites in the chat, but I wasn't typing quite fast enough for the socials, but I trust that you all are capable yourselves. Laura, Marisa, thank you both so much for being here tonight for such a fantastic conversation. And thanks to all of you in the audience for joining us tonight. I'll give one more plug. You can buy both Laura and Marisa's books at Greenlight Bookstore online or in the stores. We have them in stock. And if you want a signed copy of those summer nights, we'll have some in the stores after tomorrow evening, but you can also order online. Just make sure you put in the order comments that you would like a signed copy. Otherwise, thank you all so much for your time tonight and have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay.
Bye.